pasti bisa.
Fakultas Ilmu Komunikasi adalah salah satu fakultas di kampus UNISBA, kampus terkemuka di Bandung. Dengan visi menjadi fakultas mandiri, maju dan terkemuka di Asia dalam pengembangan ilmu komunikasi berbasis teknologi digital dengan nilai-nilai Islam pada tahun 2033. Kampus yang berlokasi di Jalan Taman Sari nomor 1 Bandung ini memiliki tujuan menghasilkan insan-insan akademis, serta memiliki mental pejuang atau mujahid, semangat peneliti atau mujtahid, dan gairah pembaharu atau mujadid. Fikom UNISBA terus mengembangkan diri dalam berbagai aspek keilmuan dan teknologi. Fikom UNISBA telah mendapatkan akreditasi unggul dan telah menghasilkan lulusan yang mampu bersaing di industri kerja dan entrepreneurship. Karena Fikom UNISBA didukung oleh 7 laboratorium komunikasi yang up to date. Di antaranya, Lab Multimedia, Lab Fotografi, Lab Film, Lab Radio, Lab Grafis, Lab Simulasi Komunikasi, dan Lab Televisi. Fikom UNISBA juga memiliki program studi magister yang telah berdiri sejak tahun 2012 dan pada tahun 2022 Fikom UNISBA telah berhasil mendirikan program studi doktor untuk menunjang studi lanjut di bidang komunikasi dan secara bersama-sama bersinergi untuk menjawab tantangan perkembangan keilmuan dan teknologi komunikasi. Fakultas Ilmu. Welcome to Universitas Islam Bandung UNISBA. Welcome to the Master of Communications Studies program. Our vision is to become a qualified, advanced, and professional study program in information and communication technology based on Islamic values at the Asian level in 2033. Graduates of the UNISBA Master of Communication Studies program can work as communication planners, communication consultants, communication managers in business organizations, government, and social organizations. Feature programs that we offer are special interests of communication in business, politics, health, and education, hybrid classroom, weekend class, completed 2-year program, and visiting a lecture.
Enter and thrive in professional competition by joining study at Master of Communication Science Fikom UNISBA.
Welcome to Universitas Islam Bandung UNISBA. Welcome to the Master of Communications Studies program. Our vision is to become a qualified, advanced, and professional study program in information and communication technology based on Islamic values at the Asian level in 2033. Graduates of the UNISBA Master of Communication Studies program can work as communication planners, communication consultants, communication managers in business organizations, government, and social organizations. Future programs that we offer are special interests of communication in business, politics, health, and education, hybrid classroom, weekend class, completed 2 years program, and visiting a lecture.
Enter and thrive in professional competition by joining study at Master of Communication Science (Pi.Com) UNISBA.
Welcome to Universitas Islam Bandung UNISBA. Welcome to the Master of Communication Studies program. Our vision is to become a qualified, advanced, and professional study program in information and communication technology based on Islamic values at the Asian level in 2033. Graduates of the UNISBA Master of Communication Studies program can work as communication planners, communication consultants, communication managers in business organizations, government, and social organizations. Future programs that we offer are special interests of communication in business, politics, health, and education, hybrid classroom, weekend class, completed 2 years program, and visiting a lecture.
Enter and thrive in professional competition by joining study at Master of Communication Science (Pi.Com) UNISBA.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillah. Terima kasih sudah join Ibu Bapak sekalian, terutama untuk Ibu Dekan kami, Prof. Atie Rachmiatie, kemudian juga Ibu Wakil Dekan 3, Ibu Dr. Tresna Wiwitan. Terima kasih juga tentu saja host pada siang hari ini yaitu Prof. Ike ya, sudah join dari tadi malah sudah siap kalau Prof. Ike dari tadi. Kemudian saya ingin menyapa juga beberapa hadirin ya. Oh, ada Bu Wadek 2 juga, Ibu Dr. Dede Fatia. Terima kasih sudah join Ibu. Kemudian saya ingin menyapa beberapa tamu yang sudah join, diantaranya Prof. Uji Lestari dari UPN Jogja. Terima kasih sudah join Prof.
Terima kasih, selamat siang.
Siang Ibu. Di Jogja nih Bu?
Di Jogja, ya.
Ya, baik, terima kasih ya Bu. Kemudian terima kasih. Kemudian saya ucapkan selamat datang kepada Bapak Edwi Arif Sosiawan dari FISIP UPN Veteran Yogyakarta. Terima kasih sudah join. Kemudian
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Apa kabar Pak?
Alhamdulillah saya Pangestu.
Alhamdulillah. Sama-sama di Jogja ya dengan Prof. Puji ya.
Muhun.
Aduh, muhun. Baik. Kemudian saya ingin menyapa juga Dr. Ahmad Herman S.Sos M.Si dari Universitas Tadulako. Waduh, jauh sekali nih Pak. Apa kabar Pak?
Alhamdulillah, sehat walafiat.
Cerah cuaca di sana Pak.
Gimana kabarnya Prof. Puji, Pak Edi? Semoga sehat-sehat.
Baik, baik, Pak Herman.
Salam dari Palu.
Oke.
Ya.
Baik, terima kasih juga kepada para hadirin. Nanti kita akan melaksanakan acara ini di sebentar lagi. Saya insya Allah akan menggunakan bahasa Inggris nanti setelah saya mulai secara resmi. Ini saya sapa-sapa dulu gitu ya. Kemudian tapi nanti bisa kita mix atau misalnya nanti pembicaranya karena dari Australia ya. Sudah join belum? Oke. Ini kita sedang menunggu pembicara untuk join. Sebentar lagi, tadi janjinya jam 1:10 waktu Indonesia. Kalau di sana mungkin sudah jam 3 sore ya di Australia. Jadi kita tunggu sebentar. Prof. Iko mau menyapa. dulu.
Iya, sebentar ya. Baik, terima kasih Bu Dekan sudah bergabung dengan kita. Ini ada tamu-tamu kita ya, Pak Edwi dari UPN. Assalamualaikum Pak
Siap.
Edwi.
Waalaikumsalam, siap Prof.
Ini ada juga Bu Prof Puji.
Prof
Senang ya
Ike,
Bu kita bermitra ini antara UPN dengan Mikom
sukses Prof
Unisba.
Ike,
Ya.
ya.
Dan ini ada yang jauh banget ini Pak Ahmad Herman dari Palu ini ya Pak. Ya,
Siap,
senang
siap.
sekali ini
Siap, Prof.
sudah
Ike.
bisa ya. Agar nanti kita akan bersama-sama mendengarkan pembicara kita ya. Ya, silakan Bu An kalau mau dilanjutkan. Terima kasih.
Baik, mungkin
Ini
pengumuman
Bu,
dulu untuk para
izin Bu
peserta.
Prof Ike.
Oh ya, ada.
Ini kami mengerahkan beberapa mahasiswa untuk mengikuti, bahkan mata kuliah jadwal hari Jumat ini juga diwajibkan untuk mengikuti kegiatan Studium
Waduh,
General.
ya terima kasih Pak. Ini diliburkan ya.
Iya,
Wah, luar
siap.
biasa.
Luar biasa
Mohon
ini
izin.
Pak.
Siap.
Bapak Ibu, baik yang sudah join, mohon untuk bisa mengakses virtual background kami untuk digunakan selama acara berlangsung. Sudah di-share di chat box. Mungkin operator bisa bantu untuk share lagi bagi yang baru join mungkin. Mohon kalau bisa. Sudah kami share lagi, mohon untuk nanti supaya bisa digunakan, supaya seragam ya. Baik, ini terima kasih yang sudah menggunakan virtual background. Yang belum nanti mohon, kita nanti ada sesi foto juga, jadi kami berharap nanti bisa sama gitu backgroundnya untuk para peserta gitu. Atau ada yang kesulitan mengakses virtual background-nya? Barangkali? Kita menunggu sebentar lagi mungkin ya. Apa beda jam gitu ya sini? Tadi sebetulnya beliau sudah join, sudah cek sound, sudah cek sudah share screen tadi pukul 12.30 waktu Indonesia Barat. Jadi dan sudah saya ingatkan untuk join. Belum join? Hah? Baik, alhamdulillah. Dr. Tapsell has already joined us. Yeah. Okay, we will start our seminar. Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, by whose grace we can gather this afternoon in the Studium General, which organized by Master of Communication Science Study Program at Communication Science Faculty Universitas Islam Bandung. Thank you to the Dean of Communication Science Faculty UNISBA, Professor Dr. Atie Rachmiatie, M.Si, the Vice Deans, the Head of Study Program for attending this event. And thank you for our speaker, Dr. Tapsell, who has joined from Australia. We are waiting for you. Okay, and to the student and participant who attends from various cities, welcome. Thank you for joining the event with this theme, Disinformation, the Media, and AI. To begin with, we will listen to recitation of Quran by Rian. Rian is the student of Master of Communication Science UNISBA. He will recite Quran Surah Al-Imran verses 103 to 104. Rian, the screen is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا لا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم ألف بين قلوبكم فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون ولتكن أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون صدق الله العظيم. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Rian. Before we delve into our today's enlightened discussion, I would like to invite our esteemed Dean to offer a warm welcome to our distinguished speaker and our attentive participants. Professor Dr. Atie Rachmiatie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Aan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirrabbilalamin. Wassalatu wassalamu asrofil anbiya wa mursalin wa ala alihi washabihi ajmain amma ba'du. Rabbi shrahli sadri wa yassirli amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. The Honorable Main Speaker, Dr. Tapsell from Australian National University, Deputy Dean, Dr. Ferry, Dr. Dede Fardia, Dr. Tresna Wiwitan, Head of Magister Studi Program, Professor Ike Junita, and special Prof. Puji Lestari from UPN Jogja, and lecturers, professor and student magister program from Universitas Tadulako, Palu, and maybe Papua. I look this from Papua. And all participants who I'm proud. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, let us offer praise and gratitude to the presence of God Almighty, because by His mercy and grace we can gather at this Studium Generale. On this occasion, we will discuss a very relevant and important topic in the current digital era. We title Disinformation, Media and Artificial Intelligence. Distinguished guests, we live in the age where information flows so quickly and it is easily accessible. As we know that media, both conventional media and digital media, has important position in shaping public opinion, mindset, and people behavior in everyday life. However, behind this easy access to information and digital euphoria, we are faced with big challenge, namely disinformation, misinformation, malinformation. Then the spread of false or misleading information are disseminated with the aim of serving certain interests. It's not a new phenomenon. However, with advance in technology, especially in the internet and social media, disinformation can spread at a speed and scale we have never imagined before. This can have very detrimental impact, ranging from confusing the public, damaging the reputation of individual or institution, to triggering social and political conflict. In other hand, artificial intelligence as an advancement in information technology has two controversial sides, like two sides of a coin, the positive side and the negative side. AI has great potential for natural language processing, big data analysis, and learning, helping identify and verify information, detecting pattern in a spread of fake news, and providing tools for journalists and researchers to conduct more in-depth and accurate investigation. However, we also have to be careful. AI itself can be a tool used to spread disinformation. For example, through deepfakes or automated bot that spread fake news. Therefore, we need to understand both the opportunity and the threat posed by this technology. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope our role as academic researcher and student is very crucial in facing this challenge. We need to continue to improve media and digital literacy, develop critical skill in assessing information, and prioritize ethics in the use of technology. Collaboration between various scientific disciplines is also very necessary to find effective and sustainable solutions in dealing with disinformation. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope through this Studium Generale, we can all gain new insight, deepen understanding, and inspire real action in dealing with disinformation in the digital era. Let's discuss in spirit of openness and curiosity, and together find the best way to harness media and AI for the common good. Welcome to Studium General. I hope this event is useful and provide inspiration for all of us. Thank you very much for your attention. By saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I officially open the Studium General event. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Dr. Atie Rachmiatie, for your opening remarks. Now, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Junita Wardani, S.Sos M.Si, the head of the Master of Communication Study Program at UNISBA, to deliver her welcoming speech to the speaker and the audience. Prof. Ike, please.
Terima kasih Bu Aan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. To the Honorable Dean of Faculty of Communication Science UNISBA, Professor Dr. Atie Rachmiatie, M.Si and staff. To the Honorable Dr. Tapsell, lecturer in the Australian National University as our distinguished speaker for today. Master student in Communication Science, Faculty of Communication Science UNISBA, doctoral student and undergraduate student of FICOM UNISBA, already with us, master students of UPN Veteran Yogyakarta, master students of University of Riau, and master student of FISIP Tadulako University Unpad. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. All praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the merciful and beneficent one who blessed us with the mercy, and we are still given health favor to be here. Salawat dan salam be upon to our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his friends, family, and followers until the end of time. Alhamdulillah, I'm proud to state that today, the Master of Communication Science UNISBA is holding a Studium General with the theme Disinformation, the Media, and AI. The impact of globalization on communication has been extraordinary. So, the challenges in media management will also become greater. AI problems is humanity's problem. AI and technological developments have an impact of humanity. The effects of technology solve many issues as well as we give rise to many new issues. When talking about AI, we must concentrate on humanity and its impact. When technology advances, humanity must be paid attention. It is important to keep building attention to humanity aspect. There is a story behind the technology that must be delivered. Learning and literacy are a continuous process. This is also related to the presence of artificial intelligence, which will disrupt an existence of various media, disinformation, the media, and AI. All of this will be discussed thoroughly by our speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, at Master of Faculty of Communication Science UNISBA Studium General, there will be great speakers who will share their knowledge with us. Thanks to Dr. Tapsell, lecturer in Australian National University, as our speaker for today. Ladies and gentlemen, Master of Faculty of Communication Science UNISBA plans various programs to support lecturers and improve student competence, including by presenting speakers from our home university and abroad, as well as practitioners through different scientific meetings. We do hope that graduates of Master of Communication Science UNISBA will be able to take part and compete in various fields of communication after graduation. That's all I can say that in this time, please enjoy the material from the speaker and take advantage of it through discussion. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Well, thank you, Prof. Ike, for your welcome. Now we are going to take a group photo session. So please open your camera, all the participants, and Smile, of course smile ya. Mr. Febri will take some pictures of us. Hold on your smile for a moment ya. Ditahan senyumnya. Ya, kita akan ambil foto dulu. Ada berapa layar ini? Oke, ada 5 layar. Mohon ditahan senyumnya. Ya, hold your smile. Oke. Finish? Okay, yes, it's done. Thank you. Now, before we start the seminar, I would like to tell you a little bit about our distinguished speaker, Dr. Tapsell. Dr. Tapsell is an associate professor, Department of Gender, Culture and Media, School of Culture, History and Language, College of Asia and the Pacific, the Australian National University. He is also a director of ANU Malaysia Institute since 2016. He has a lot of publication, yeah, we know that. But I would like to mention two of the best publication he has. The first, Media Power in Indonesia, Oligarchs, Citizen and the Digital Revolution. It was published in London in 2017. And it also has already translated it into Indonesia in 2018. The title was Kuasa Media. Jadi sudah diterjemahkan ke dalam bahasa Indonesia buku ini dan sangat penting ya untuk kita memahami mengenai media di Indonesia. Risetnya luar biasa. And the second, Byline Balibo Bali Bombing, Australian Journalist in Indonesia. It was published in Melbourne 2014. Since Dr. Tapsell doing a lot of research about Indonesia, so she has a lot of students from Indonesia too doing PhD. Some of them is Salvatore Simarmata with the title Kampanye Hitam and Conceptualizing in Negative Campaigning in Indonesia since 2019. Anita Wahid with the title Fake News and Disinformation Mitigation in Indonesia since 2022, and Muhammad Beni Saputra with the title Local News, Democracy and the Public Sphere in Indonesia since 2022. So perhaps some of our audience would like to continue their study in Australia and thinking about Dr. Tapsell to become the future supervisor, perhaps, I don't know, yeah. And then Dr. Tapsell also has written regularly for online academic studies, East Asia Forum, Inside Story, and New Mandala, as well as The Conversation. He has been a contributor to television commentary regarding Indonesia and Malaysian affairs on Australia and Southeast Asia TV and radio, the ABC, including international news organizations like CNBC, Al Jazeera, and BBC. Dr. Tapsell also joined board membership of Journal Editorial Board, Asiascape Digital Asia, published in Leiden University, Netherlands since 2014. And then ANU representative, the Australian Consortium of In-Country Indonesian Studies since 2019. ANU's News Mandala website, ANU Southeast Asia Institute since 2017, and Indonesia Project Indonesia Study Group Seminar Series Board since 2012. And a lot of things. I cannot share all his activities because so many, yeah. Okay, Dr. Tapsell, thank you for being our speaker, yeah. Thank you for joining us. And I just realized that you are very well known in Indonesia. Yeah, because when I shared the flyer and a lot of my colleagues share very enthusiastic and would like to join, but some of them unfortunately cannot join. Yeah, so I'm very lucky to know you, even though we haven't never met in person. Yeah, we have met in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, virtually. Yeah. Okay. Now, without further ado, let's get into enriching and enlightening discussion. You have 30 minutes to share your presentation, and I will inform you when the time is up. So, Dr. Tapsell, now the screen is yours.
Well, Terima kasih banyak for that wonderful introduction. And thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you all. Ibu Dekan, Ibu Ika, thank you for facilitating this talk for me. I'm honored to be the keynote speaker for your talk. It's also wonderful, I should say, to be introduced by 3 women and an Ibu Dekan, and it's actually quite rare. And I think it's a wonderful thing that the leadership is run by women at the Bandung University Islam. And it's something that is hard to do because there's glass ceiling in Australia and in Indonesia for women to be in positions of leadership. And it's so wonderful to be introduced by 3 women. ANU actually for the first time has appointed a female rector. It took 75 years for them to appoint a female rector. Everyone prior to that has been a man. But now we actually have a female rector. So things are improving. And I hope things improving as well in Indonesia in leadership. Hari ini saya akan berbicara dalam bahasa Inggris ya, dan presentasi ini sudah disiapkan dalam bahasa Inggris. Mohon maaf ya, lebih gampang kalau saya berbicara bahasa Inggris dan ya, tapi nanti kalau ada pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia silakan, saya bisa mengerti dan paham kalau bahasa Malay sedikit. But if I'm speaking for 30 minutes on a complex topic, it's easier for me to deliver in English. So I will try to speak slowly and I will deliver slides as well. Let me just share my screen here.
Okay.
Okay. So today I will be talking about 3 very big topics, and I have also put my email down there if you have any questions afterwards or in the future. I would like to talk about my research across 3 countries in Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And mostly I will be talking about recent elections in those 3 countries when I talk about the changing nature of disinformation, media, and AI in Southeast Asia. So I'm trying to compare and contrast. There are many experts on disinformation, media, and AI in Indonesia. I learn a lot from them in many universities in Indonesia, similarly in Malaysia and Philippines. But I have the privilege at the Australian National University to be able to travel to 3 different countries and try to understand this from a regional perspective, which I think allows for some interesting insights when we compare 3 countries and try to understand where Indonesia is compared to other countries in this space. So my first slide is to try to get you to conceptualize what people are saying is a problem in the world right now. And there are many different terms that we've used to try and identify the problem. But if you look at something like the World Economic Forum, they say that in the short term, the biggest problem in the world right now is disinformation. They say in the long term, it is climate change, but in the short term, the biggest problem is disinformation. And various other global bodies have used terms to try to understand what is the problem that is going on in our information society. The World Health Organization used the term infodemic, and they used the term that there is too much information, including false or misleading information and digital in physical environments. During the COVID-19, scholars talked about an epidemic of misinformation. There was a perfect storm of misinformation. We were being polluted by misinformation. But overall, we find it hard to define what it is that we mean by these terms. Other terms that Ibu Ike already described is malinformation, misinformation, disinformation, post-truth is another one that comes out sometimes. How do we try to make sense of all of this? What exactly is the problem? So in this presentation, I'll try to be specific and talk about some specific problems that are occurring in elections, which are obviously crucial to democracy. The first topic and my main research that I have conducted over the past 5 years has really been research on what you might call the political economy of disinformation. What I mean by political economy of disinformation is to try to understand who gets paid and who is employed to work in the field of disinformation. And so I've collaborated with other scholars in the Philippines and Malaysia and Thailand, and I've called upon other work from other scholars that I cite here who are trying to understand who is behind the people who are behind the process of creating and distributing disinformation. And I guess the first point to tell you, when we think about AI, we think about computers, and we think about automation, and we think about automatically generated as if there is no person behind it. It is technology. But my research actually is to remind us that amongst all of these new technologies, there are people who are behind the product, whether that is TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, AI, whatever it might be. There are people whose brains are being used to create this form of disinformation, and often, biasanya, they are getting paid to do it for various reasons, or they make money doing it. And I think that's important to remember when we think about AI. It doesn't come, technology is not created out of nowhere. Usually someone is making money to try to make this work, right? So in previous research, I've tried to, and Jonathan Ong and I have tried to use this term demystifying disinformation. What we mean by demystifying is trying to take away the myth that there is this evil computer that is trying to take over society, or that there is a process which nobody really can stop. If you think of sci-fi movies about AI or something like that. But actually demystifying disinformation says, actually, it's very jelas, it's very clear that there are financial models which allow for the making of money in order to produce disinformation. There's nothing extraordinary about that. People have been making money, creating new industries for thousands of years. Disinformation is now part of this new industry that many people are making money for. Sometimes the state is doing it in order to control information. Sometimes it's political parties who are trying to control the narrative. Sometimes it's advertisers and companies whose job it is to try to push a certain agenda because they are being paid to promote that agenda. Or sometimes it's individuals who are simply trying to make money by clickbait. By clickbait, I mean the more that you click on it, the more money they will get from Google or YouTube. So in the 4 work models, I'm trying to say that the political economy of disinformation is really important in understanding why disinformation works. It works because people make money from it. In Indonesia, scholars have looked at practices of state propaganda, and in the Philippines, of course, as well. But some Indonesian scholars have really focused more recent times on the issue of disinformation by the state. Now, sometimes that is a little bit different to what I am looking at here on the 4 work models, but you'll see number 1, I say the state-sponsored model. So what I'm talking about, what Indonesian scholars have mostly written about when they talk about disinformation, is many will write about Buzzer Istana, for example, or buzzer, influencer istana, these kind of topics. That is what other Indonesian scholars have written about. They often write about Papua, they write about oil palm. And so this topic has become a very tricky topic to write about in Indonesia, because criticizing the government can sometimes be a challenging topic to write about. But this is something that is growing all around the world and in Southeast Asia, where state propaganda becomes part of the manipulation or the way in which discourse is changed online. TikTok is also a really important phenomenon for trying to understand new trends in media, disinformation, and also AI, which I'll come to later in the Indonesia example. But in recent elections in Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, all the mainstream media and even some scholars wrote a lot about TikTok, that TikTok was changing the nature of how a political campaign worked. And this is still something we don't fully understand. Kalau saya berbicara terus terang, kita belum tahu tetap sekali what is the influence of TikTok. But we are trying to understand it better because it is a new platform. And often TikTok is seen as a battlefield for youth votes. Perhaps many of you here have a TikTok account, and in the question and answer, you can tell me about some of the ways in which TikTok can be used for disinformation or AI. In the Philippines, social media became the story of the campaign, and indeed, disinformation and TikTok became a crucial aspect of the Philippines election campaign, because the Philippines elected the son of the former dictator, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who was the son of the dictator Marcos Sr., who was in charge of the Philippines and put it under martial law and essentially disbanded democratic process until 1986 in the Philippines. So many scholars who wrote about the impact of disinformation in the Philippines said that it was done in order to manipulate history, and that TikTok rewrites history for young people and tries to convince young people that the Marcos dictatorship was in fact a glory time for the Philippines. It was a wonderful time of economic success, of political stability, where Philippines was this great country recognized all around the world. Many in Indonesia were worried that a similar type of campaign would be pushed in the Indonesia election, that there would be disinformation and AI on TikTok to say Suharto was a glorious leader, Indonesia was a success under Orde Baru, everything was wonderful, Indonesia was world recognized. But actually, it didn't really happen in the 2024 election in Indonesia. That kind of campaign did not occur. But in the Philippines, this idea of saying wonderful things about the country, of where it's come from and where it was heading, was really the story which some scholars wrote about being a triumph of disinformation. In Malaysia in 2022, TikTok was also really crucial to the campaign. In Malaysia, what surprised everyone was that the Islamic Party, PAS, got the most seats in parliament. And they surprised many because PAS generally doesn't do as well as other parties. If you think of Islamist parties, for example, in Indonesia, that generally don't get the huge amounts of votes, right? That is also the case in Malaysia. There's people who vote for Islamic parties in Kelantan and Terengganu and in Kedah, but generally speaking, across Malaysia, the PAS Islamic Party doesn't usually get a lot. But in 2022, they got a huge amount of votes, the most out of any party, and the most seats out of any party. And so the question that people were asking was, why? What was it about this election? And scholars have said that young Islamic influencers who were on TikTok, some of whom were paid, some of whom were not, really promoted Islam as being central to the campaign and promoted PAS, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly, to say that if you really were an Islamic voter, you should vote for the Islamic Party. And they did it in very creative ways and often quite fun ways. They made Islam out to be a beautiful religion, which of course it is, but they linked that to politics and elections, and they were very positive in their campaigns about Islam and about PAS. This wasn't disinformation all the time, which was negative. Often it was very positive style campaigning on TikTok. At the same time, there was often disinformation, which was saying that other parties were pro-communist, that if you didn't vote for the Islamic Party, then Malaysia would no longer be an Islamic country, and all of the disinformation that usually comes during election time. So we're still trying to understand the impact of this, but certainly the role of TikTok and religion in Malaysia was a very important factor in the election. And then finally to Indonesia, where, as you know, the most recent election campaign was successful for Prabowo and Gibran. And when scholars and analysts write about the Prabowo-Gibran campaign, they tend to focus on the impact that the Gemoy campaign had on reshaping the narrative of Prabowo Subianto in particular. As some of you, or many of you would know, but perhaps younger people don't, Prabowo ran in 2014 as a nationalist populist candidate. He got up on a horse. He became part of this nationalistic movement. It was a very populist campaign, and it was a very close campaign in which disinformation was central to both sides attacking each other. You know, the tadpole and the what's the other one? The tadpole and the kampret. And so in 2019, Prabowo ran much more as an Islamist populist, allying himself much more to the movement for Islamic populism. By 2024, having lost twice, they really reshaped his image to say, I am a cute, cuddly grandfather, I am harmless, I am fun. And generally, it worked very well. And AI, in terms of the way in which they were depicted, cute, cuddly characters, you know, the nice cheeks, chubby cheek, big eyes for Gibran, these kind of things, is a new form of political campaigning. And scholars are still trying to understand the impact of that on politics. Is it actually factually correct that Prabowo is a cute and cuddly character? Or is there actually much more to his past and to his beliefs, which might shape the future for Indonesia over the next 5 years? That is the question that scholars and journalists are asking. But certainly the impact of the campaign had similarities to what we saw in Malaysia, where we had a very positive campaign. And we had a lot of messages that were saying, you know, Indonesia maju, or everything is moving well. I will continue the policies of the previous government. I will have support from the incumbent. In Marcos's case, he had support from Duterte. In Prabowo's case, he obviously had support from Jokowi. And so that infrastructure that is enabled to be supported from the government to the campaign of Prabowo or the campaign of Marcos really helped them in the campaign. So they're the three recent elections. How am I doing for time? I should try to speed up a little bit. They're the three most recent elections, and we can talk about this in the question and answer if we would like more specifics about the Prabowo campaign. But as we try to summarize what we saw in Indonesia in 2024, it's important to try to put it in the context of what happened in the last two elections. In 2014 and 2019, disinformation and polarization were very hot topics for people writing scriptsies or masters or S3. I think you saw my Indonesian PhD students, Salvatore Simamata, Anita Wahid. They're writing about disinformasi, kampanye hitam, polarisasi, these kind of topics. And so for mitigators of disinformation or people who write about disinformation, they expected the same in 2024. And they expected that there would be a lot of polarisasi and there would be perhaps violence and there would be perhaps negative campaigning or more kampanye hitam, much more around race, religion, and negative style campaigning. Actually, for the most part, that didn't happen. What people feared for 2024 election in Indonesia, for example, that AI would be central to deep fake accounts. You know, deep fake, right? That didn't really happen. There was 1 or 2 cases of deep fake trying to get Suharto to endorse Prabowo, you know, which was linked to Golkar Party. But for the most part, AI deepfakes were not central to the Indonesia election campaign. Disinformation in the way that has happened previously was not really that bad in 2024. We did not see a lot of accusations that candidates were not Islamic. The communist bogeyman stuff that we often see in election campaign in Indonesia didn't really occur. Negative campaigning was not actually that central to a campaign for Prabowo Gibran or for Anies or for Ganjar. Negative campaigning was largely not that common. In the debates, for example, there were 5 televised debates. Prabowo attended all of them, as did Anies and Ganjar, and they all, for the most part, were very polite to each other, for the most part. That is different to what we've seen, for example, in Philippines, where Ferdinand Marcos Jr. refused to attend any debates. He said, I will not attend them. So they had a podium without him there. The others attended, but Marcos Jr. did not. In Indonesia's case, everybody attended. So the government, Indonesian government, is often saying, well, this was a very successful election. Disinformation was not strong. The candidates did not attack each other. Deep fake and polarizing content was not central. So you could say that actually things are improving in Indonesia. Alternatively, you could say that we have seen a new form of campaign tactics which are evolving. And those new forms of campaign tactics are to move away from negative campaigning and to focus on positive campaigning, but the type of campaign which does not allow for comment and criticism, and one which actually avoids difficult questions. During the campaign, for example, Prabowo mostly avoided interviews with journalists. In the foreign media, as I understand it, he only gave 1 interview to foreign media during the election campaign, and that was with Al Jazeera, a very short transcript interview. He tends to like to avoid difficult questions. And in the debates, there was not a lot of serious policy commitments which the candidates could then discuss with each other. The Gemoy campaign is often very gimmicky. There's not a lot of substance to that campaign. What do the candidates stand for when it comes to serious policy issues that will affect the future of Indonesia? Perubahan iklim, for example. China and the South China Sea, for example. Economics and trade, rising inequality, the role of religious groups and helping minority groups. These kind of issues were often avoided on the campaign. And when candidates spoke about policy issues, they were very shallow in the responses that they gave during the debate. During the debates for the Prabowo Gibran campaign, we often saw candidates say accurate things. So it wasn't disinformation, but they also did not say anything that was very substantial. And so the criticism that one might have of PAS in Malaysia or Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in the Philippines, or indeed Prabowo Gibran, would to say there is less substance, tidak ada substansi to the discourse or to the topics of the election campaign. And that is concerning for those of us who work on democracy and election campaigns. Just a final a slide very quickly, just to conclude that Southeast Asia still has media freedom challenges. So while these countries, including Indonesia, is incredibly free on what you can say online, for journalists and for independent media, unfortunately, out of 180 countries, Southeast Asian countries rank quite poorly. Indonesia does better than many others. But for Philippines, Cambodia, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Singapore, of course, media freedom is still very much a challenge. It's very hard to be an independent journalist who can criticize powerful elites and government in Southeast Asia. So, to conclude, how do we try to improve what we might call a healthy information society? To go back to the first slide about an infodemic, we try to think about what defeats an infodemic. How do you mitigate disinformation and AI and misinformation and malinformation and all of that? And these are the challenges globally, actually. It's a problem in Australia, in my country as well. Has long been, some of these issues have long been a problem in Australia. So it's not only Indonesia as well, but this is what we need to be working towards. This has to be our visi dan misi, right, for a healthy information society. And the first would be a diverse media, which allow for a range of voices, and not just one or two big media companies. That is a huge challenge in Australia, by the way, where Rupert Murdoch controls much of the Australian media. But increasingly in Indonesia, it is the big conglomerates that control mainstream media on television and on radio and newspapers. So how do we have a diverse amount of media which actually represents different communities and allows for diversity of opinions? We need to have media which is independent from government, from owners and from advertisers. In Southeast Asia, in Singapore and Malaysia and Vietnam and Myanmar, the biggest problem is that the media cannot be independent from government. That is less of a problem in Indonesia, but the concern is that it's very hard to criticize the government if you are a media company. Some organizations like Tempo, they are very independent. You know, they're like sangat mandiri, I guess, or you know. So we need to grow organizations to make sure that Tempo can survive in this new era. We need professional journalists, people who are trained through university degrees to be professional seekers of the truth, with the idea that journalism is something that someone does not want written. Everything else is public relations. And I use this quote because in Indonesia, in local media, one of the biggest challenges is local media is often linked to pemerintah daerah. And the advertorials and the advertising space that money comes through to local media is often supported by local government. So they cannot criticize the government, or they rely on government advertising. We need responsible tech platforms who are accountable. Facebook is increasingly problematic under Mark Zuckerberg. Elon Musk is destroying Twitter. It is a disaster. TikTok is struggling to show accountability for some of its misinformation and disinformation that is being spread on the platform. So how do we do that? That's a huge challenge. We need regulation which is driven by civil society actors rather than government. What I mean by that is that if the government comes in with a hammer and becomes very strict about regulation, you will end up with rules which support government policies. And actually what we need for regulation is from civil society. For example, Dewan Pers is a very good model for other countries. Press ombudsman in local areas has been very successful in Indonesia, in where regulation is driven by groups which are independent from government. So we need organizations like KPU, KPK, Dewan Pers, who are funded by government but are independent from the government. And finally, we need meaningful media literacy programs. In other words, people need to understand that disinformation industry exists and to be aware of some of the challenges that they face when they're receiving information, that it could be lies and fake news and berita hoax and, you know, campaign hitam and so on. Because if people understand the challenges, then they are much more likely to ignore that, and then the disinformation industry does not make money. So literacy programs are important, but they're not the only thing. Often Indonesian scholars or NGOs will say all of the problems of infodemic can be solved by media literacy. Actually, I disagree with that argument. I think media literacy is only one of many policy solutions, but it's not the only solution. We cannot rely only on universities and schools if there is a whole challenge of state-sponsored propaganda and disinformation funded by foreign governments and by other actors. Tapi mungkin ada lagi yang Anda akan ditambah. Maybe there are more that you can add, and I would love to hear of more in the Q&A session. So I will conclude now and would love to hear more about your thoughts and questions and comments, because for me, obviously, that's the highlight, to be able to hear from you and to get feedback and have questions and answer in these Zoom sessions. So thank you again, Ibu Ika, Ibu Dekan, semua di sana, and look forward to hearing your questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tapsell, for sharing your insight with us. It's very interesting, I mean, compared to the Philippines, I think Indonesia is a little bit better. I think, I think. But of course, we have a lot of critics for the government, for Dewan Pers. Even you say that Dewan Pers is a good example, but some of us maybe disagree. But okay. Now, I would like to invite the audience to ask the question. Don't be shy. You can raise your hand or ask via chat box. Can you see? Okay, I can see the audience. Is there anyone? Raise the hand.
Please do tell the audience why why you would disagree on Dewan Pers. That would be a great starting point.
Okay, as a lecturer, I think that a lot of cases in Indonesian media, and they, for example, my student, they say that why the media still publish news that like disinformation or something like that, but the Dewan Pers, like they know, but they act like they don't know about it. And I said that, well, some of the member of Dewan Pers is also the media owners. So that perhaps for them it is quite difficult to punish. For example, I know that a lot of work they've done, a lot of work, but still a lot of things that need to be covered. So
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. How do we create a better regulatory body which is independent and also which has some power to do something? Because the criticism of Day One Press is it doesn't really do much.
Yep.
So that's a really good point. I think compared to say Philippines or Malaysia, where these organizations don't even exist,
Yeah.
I would rather have Day One Pers than not have Day One Pers. For example, in Malaysia, they're trying to create the equivalent of Day One Pers, and the government's saying no, we're not going to have it. So I always encourage Malaysia. Well, look at Indonesia. There's some good things that are happening there, but I completely agree with you that there are still problems with Day One Pers. Yeah.
Yeah, and also about I would like to ask your opinion. If you compare the 2024 election and before, which one is better? I mean, from the perspective of the media.
Yeah, it's a look. I must admit I haven't got a methodology for comparing the previous elections to this one. My concern in previous elections was always that Indonesian writers and academics worried too much about polarization. I believe personally, and I can understand why they did, because it can lead to violence, and there is Islam versus non-Islam, and so many problems. And I can understand why scholars wrote about polarization. But I worried that it would mean that you would never get a serious debate anymore, because everybody was trying to reduce polarization and therefore reduce debate.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, that's kind of what the Jokowi government has tried to do. They've tried to say, we want to reduce disinformation, we want to reduce polarization, understandably. But then by backing the Prabowo Gibran campaign and by using the resources of the incumbency to support a Prabowo Gibran campaign, which allowed for over 50% of the vote in the first round, I felt that we didn't really see an election that I wanted to see, which was much more substantial.
Yep.
And so my concern is that as the Prabowo Gibran presidency, or the Prabowo presidency is maju, as goes forward, all of the political parties will join behind the government. There will be no opposition. And then what kind of democracy is Indonesia going to be? That has already happened, of course, under Jokowi and to some extent under S.Pi. But I feel like that trend of being able to debate important topics is gone in the parliament now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, I also feel something like that here in Indonesia. Okay, Dr. Tapsell, there is someone who raised hand. Bapak Franz Rufino, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Is it possible to me speak in bahasa?
Silakan, Pak. Ya.
Terima kasih, Dr. Tapsell. Bagaimana tanggapan dari Dr. Tapsell terkait masalah imitate dari Philippine campaign terkait penggunaan TikTok? Karena kan yang pada waktu campaign di Indonesian yang election kemarin kan lebih ke arah orang sepertinya meremehkan, menilai dari kampanye Prabowo dia imitate dari Marcos Junior terkait penggunaan TikTok untuk dance-nya. Jadi sementara kan tidak bagi kelompoknya Prabowo Gibran tidak ada masalah. Jadi dalam hal ini apakah dia tidak mengatakan ini salah dan benar karena penggunaan TikTok sebagai bagian dari campaign untuk menarik young generation untuk memilih mereka dan mereka mengajukan Gibran sebagai perwakilan generasi muda. Apakah ini dari pandangan Dr. Tapsell apa yang mungkin membuat ini perlu dikritik karena dari si mereka campaign terhadap program ada makan gratis, program pendidikan, program untuk bagaimana mengirim mahasiswa atau pelajar ke luar negeri ini kan
Yep.
masing-masing kandidat punya program, tapi yang dikritik dari Prabowo adalah penggunaan satu AI terkait masalah profil mereka berdua menjadi profil anak-anak yang lucu, gemuk, gemoy gitu. Is that? Tapi yang kedua adalah masalah TikTok dance. Ini dari sisi itu apakah bisa kita kritik hal yang tidak tepat atau salah atau bahkan mungkin dikatakan manipulate? Terima kasih.
Yeah, yeah. Terima kasih. Pertanyaan yang sangat bagus. I think there is some comparison between Philippines and Indonesia, but you are right. Sebenarnya saya setuju. Tetap sekali. It's not exactly the same. There were political campaigners who were in the Marcos campaign who then came to Indonesia to be involved in the Indonesia campaign. But I think that was overstated that they were hugely influential. I do think that there was more substance to to Prabowo's campaign. As I said, he attended the debates. Yes, there was the makan gratis policy, which you could say, well, at least that's something compared to what Marcos was saying with his, or not saying, right? But I do think where we see a similarity is this idea that the ability to stand up for questioning and for a campaign which lacks substance is seemingly a trend here. And I think that the key aspect to a Prabowo Gamoy campaign was essentially to say that this guy is cute and cuddly and fun and non-threatening. Now that you could say that that's just great political campaigning, beautiful media narratives, or you could say that actually that is a form of campaigning which is misleading and not accurate. And so when it comes to Marcos Jr., it's very clear, right, that they were spreading lies to say that the Marcos Sr. was not a dictatorship. With the Prabowo campaign, it was much simpler. It was a campaign where AI was used to sanitize discourse rather than muddy it. I hope that's clear. Yeah. But thank you. That was a wonderful question and comment.
Oke.
Thank you.
Pak Frans, sudah puas atau masih mau bertanya lagi?
Sudah cukup.
Baik, Pak Frans dari Universitas Paramadina ya. Terima kasih. Oke, teman-teman, the participant actually we have 4 door prize ya for they who are asked the question. So maybe you want to ask because of the door prize, it's okay. In the chat box, there is a question from Ibu. Sebentar, ini layar saya. Oke. Ibu Atie Suprihatin bertanya bagaimana kita dapat menyeimbangkan manfaat potensial AI dalam memerangi disinformasi dengan risiko potensialnya terhadap kebebasan berekspresi dan privasi. Can you understand it?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Ibu Atie. Yeah, it's a good question around kebebasan berekspresi dan privasi. I don't know the answer to that question because I think AI is still very new. I guess your question is about the potential. The potential, yeah. And I guess the big concern that everybody has with AI is that it will control narrative in ways which reduces the voices of independent people. And in a way that's already happening when you think of the way that AI or algorithms work on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Previously, the discourse or the online sentiment was much more organic. now the social media companies are creating algorithms through AI modeling, of course, which pushes content which is paid or content which is likely to get more engagement out of us, which means that for ordinary citizens or NGOs or independent politicians or media organizations, their content is being suppressed. And so when we think of AI, we can think of how it is working in order to show what you see on your social media accounts. And that in itself is driven by an AI modeling from Silicon Valley, which is to try to get you to buy more products and get more advertising on social media. So at the moment, that's the biggest concern with social media and AI. But in the future, when we're talking about kebebasan berekspresi and privacy, what we're talking about is a whole range of challenges relating to whether we will even have journalists anymore, because AI will write the news for us, or media companies will just hire AI chatbots and not have to pay for journalists. These kind of issues are hugely problematic if you've got AI delivering content rather than individual independent media companies. And that's what most people are most concerned about.
Oke, Ibu Atie, sudah puas ya? Atau masih ada yang mau ditanyakan sambil menunggu? I would like to invite, sorry.
Sudah, Ibu maaf saya tidak bisa on cam ya Bu ya.
Oh ya, tidak apa-apa Ibu.
Ya, terima kasih penjelasannya bisa diterima. Ini ada satu lagi pertanyaannya. Apa tantangan kita untuk memastikan akuntabilitas dan transparansi dalam penggunaan AI untuk memerangi disinformasi di media? Karena pada saat ini sejumlah media di Indonesia juga sudah menggunakan AI untuk membuat berita.
Yes.
Itu pertanyaannya. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih. Dr. Tapsell?
Yes, sorry, I missed the actual question. I take the point that they're using AI, but what was pertanyaan apa?
So some of media in Indonesia start using AI
Yes.
for writing news.
Correct.
And how to minimize the impact of that?
Yeah, well, right. So the question is how to solve it. Essentially, we just need to have money that goes to media companies that allows them to have journalists, right? So if you think of the case of Tempo, I would always advocate that Tempo is one of the most important news organizations in Southeast Asia. I think it's very important to have an organization like Tempo, and Malaysia Kini and Rappler and others in the region. But Tempo is really probably the best news magazine in Southeast Asia. How do they survive financially when most of us here are not subscribers to Tempo, and most of us are people who are not engaging with Tempo on a daily basis because we're on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and therefore they can't pay their journalists? So the answer is actually we need to subscribe to media organizations and we need to pay.
But some media just using AI journalists. And like you said before, that if the media using AI journalists, it means that we don't need the real journalists.
Well, we have to make a choice, right? Are we going to consume news that is AI journalism news, or do we want news written by journalists from independent media organizations? And so at the end of the day, the business model will determine what is successful. I guess the other argument you could say is we need the government to step in and regulate this form of model, but I don't know whether they can, even if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Bisa digambarkan bagaimana kondisinya dengan di Australia?
About AI and journalism?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Indonesia is more advanced in the media sector than Australia because the media is more entrepreneurial. Australia is hindered in entrepreneurial media by two factors. One is Rupert Murdoch still controls much of the Australian media. And so his job in many ways is to try to convince the government to try and keep the media industry the way that it is now. He doesn't want much change. So Australia is slow to reform. The second issue for Australia is we have an aging population and most of our consumers of media are older generation, while Indonesia has a much younger population and increasingly the consumers are young people, remaja and so on. So actually Indonesia is more advanced and more entrepreneurial on these activities than Australia. Having said that, of course, these issues are very much important for scholars of Australian media and people are working on this stuff. But in the media industry itself, I always think that Southeast Asia or Indonesia in particular, they try new things much faster, lebih cepat daripada Australia. Australia kadang-kadang agak pelan-pelan ya with inovasi dalam mainstream media.
Yeah. Okay. Terima kasih, Dr. Tapsell. I would like to move to another audience ya, Bapak Fauzi. Silakan.
Oke, siap. Halo, Dr. Tapsell. Thanks for your presentation. Sampurasun.
Rampes.
My name
That's
is
the answer.
Fauzi.
Rob, that's the answer. If someone said Sampurasun, we can say Rampes.
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 Doctor, I'm Fauzi from Mikom Unisba. I want to ask something about media and netizen at Indonesia. The media keeps evolving and technology is becoming more advanced. But the maturity of netizen hasn't grown in line with the platform. We are now a netizen in Indonesia called aggressive, harsh, and etc. What are your thoughts on this issue, and what is the best solution for Indonesia, especially for develop maturity for netizen at Indonesia? Thanks, Dr. Tapsell.
Terima kasih banyak untuk pertanyaan Anda. I think the issue of netizen is penting sekali dalam konteks Indonesia. And when I started working on social media and media in Indonesia tahun 2012 sebenarnya. Waktu itu ada Pilkada Jakarta and Jokowi and Ahok were campaigning against Fauzi Bowo waktu itu. And there was a lot of energy and semangat for the netizens. Netizens in Indonesia were reformist. They were young people, pemuda. They were people who were trying to change. Mereka mau berubah dalam politik Indonesia. That was the narrative of netizens in tahun 2012. Over time, the nature of netizens has changed. And I don't know why. I suspect it's because of the disinformation industry that has started to become part of online public sphere. I suspect the platforms have changed. The social media platforms used to allow for grassroots campaigning, for young people to be able to express their views more. I think that the nature of netizen has changed. Curhat was a really strong thing 15 years ago. I don't know whether young people talk about curhat as much as they used to, for example, on social media. That's a question, not a statement. So the only way to see netizen as a solution to the problem is by looking at how you can use the internet for positive reform. For example, Kawal Pemilu was a really good initiative from netizens, driven by netizens, used by people who understood voting tabulations. That was a wonderful story in Indonesia in 2014, tahun 2014 Pemilu. Kawal Pemilu was a story which made international headlines as the role that netizens can play to mendukung demokrasi. What can you say now about netizens in Indonesia? What are they doing to support democracy? What are they doing to support reform? How is the internet being used for reform? I don't know the answer, but I do know that we don't talk about netizens in the same way that we used to 10 years ago in Indonesia. And that, I think, is a problem. Maybe younger people listening here, when you go home tonight, you can think of reasons to use the internet for change, because sometimes the internet has pushed us to avoid change. But we need young people in this world to create change, and we need them to use the internet to do it. Smarter, younger people than me can answer how to do it, but we need you to do it. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tapsell. It's a lot of many of audience would like to ask. I don't know. It's because the door prize or because this is very interesting discussion, yeah. But I need to choose maybe Bapak Adam first, Bapak Adam Truedi Male. Setelah ini kemudian
Yes.
Pak Sandi, ya. Setelah ini Pak Sandi. Pak Adam, silakan.
First of all, my name is Adam Truedi. I'm not at Magister program, so sorry, but I'm at the Bachelor program, Faculty of Communication of UNISBA. But I kind of interested about this session because this session talk about in political communication, health communication, and a lot of things. And I kind of interest about Prof. Ross Tapsell kind of mentioned before is about polarization, because there's a lot of question in myself, like what role do emerging alternative media and digital platform play in providing space for diverse voice in political communication in Indonesia? Do this platform open opportunity for political pluralism or rather reinforce polarization? Because it's kind of too many misinformation in polarization. So that's the question, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Pak Adam. Yeah, that's a really good question. And the issue of tech platform responsibility is such an important topic at a time where they seem to be becoming less responsible with each day. You know, when I first started researching this topic, there was a lot of public sentiment to say that the government should not be involved in regulating tech platforms because people were happy with Facebook, they were happy with Twitter, they enjoyed social media, and they felt that it was leading to progressive reform. By 2024, even the most lefty reformist, NGO would say we need regulation of tech platforms. So the sentiment has changed around platforms. For example, misalnya, I think it was 2015, tahun 2015 atau 18, Mark Zuckerberg datang ke Indonesia dan Zuckerberg jalan-jalan sama Jokowi down Jalan Sudirman, and he was met with like loads of Jakartans who were clapping and cheering. Now, if Mark Zuckerberg was to come to Jakarta, he would probably get thrown fruit or, tomatoes in, rotten tomatoes in. So, and same with Elon Musk, and same with really anyone from Silicon Valley is now the bad guy. So how do we rein them in? How do we try to get them to be more responsible without creating laws which ultimately crack down on individuals? And this has been the problem with anti-fake news laws. Misalnya di Malaysia, they created an anti-fake news law. And the definition of fake news was news which is false or fake. Yeah, kok bisa ya? Like bagaimana? How can you define fake news is news which is fake? Well, that's a very loose definition. So what you had was the government at the time, waktu itu, the pemerintah would then use that fake news law to crack down on opposition and arrest people who criticize the government. So creating fake news laws, including termasuk undang-undang ITE di Indonesia, is not working, because usually undang-undang ITE is used by powerful people against ordinary citizens. So bringing in harsh laws has not worked. I know that I don't have great solutions here. I'm only presenting problems, but I think it is useful to frame that sometimes bringing in specific anti-fake news laws is not the solution. Australia has tried to regulate these by charging them money, but frankly, it's not working either. Facebook is now just saying we're not going to pay it. And it's not working in Canada either. Indonesia now wants to adopt the Australian model, but what if the tech platforms just say we're not going to pay? We shall see. It leads to arbitration. They go to the pengadilan, but I don't know if it will be the solution.
Okay, so it's still a lot of questions, yeah. We need to solve the problem, yeah. Okay, now Pak Sandi, silakan.
Oke, terima kasih Teh Aan. Oke. Mr. Tapsell, thanks for time to share knowledge with us. This talk about journalist freedom is nice, right? As we know, currently many journalist roles can be replaced by artificial intelligence. You know that. However, there are several exclusive work of journalists that cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence. What's that? Investigative news. Okay, we all know that currently artificial intelligence could be create hard news. Okay. Let's talk about current issue in Indonesia. Currently, the People Representative Council or DPR, DPR is revising law about broadcasting. One of the crucial articles that will be implemented in the revision is the prohibition or ban on broadcaster from investigative news. That's the issue. How can journalists be banned from making investigative news? Nah, I would like to ask you, what is your opinion about that? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
This question represent Mr. Elliot too. Thank you.
Yeah,
Mr.
there are similar question from Ibu Eliana Susan about the similar question with Pak Sandi.
Yeah, I'll have to read more on RUU Penyiaran, which I'm not across the precise revisions that you are referring to, but I will look at that more closely. I guess here's what I think. I think it's a fantastic question that you asked, by the way, because what makes a journalist differentiate from an AI journalist is investigative reporting, and I think that is 100% correct. You know, the problem for Indonesia is that so much of journalism has become very much around clickbait journalism. And you can trace this back. Actually, some of the research I'm doing recently is to look at Detik.com in 1997 and 1998 and the emergence of Detik, which at the time was incredibly innovative. Detik was doing live online reporting long before many other countries around the world and long before Twitter and Facebook existed. Detik was a wonderful innovation. But over time, Detik now produces 800 stories a day, for example, and it's short, sharp news. And so much of what Detik.com does has been replicated by Kompas.com, Republica.co, Liputan6.com, terus. They're all doing the same thing. And most of what they're doing is getting quotes or comment from the politician or the academic, docent or academics or whoever it might be, and they're just getting a quote, doorstop di dalam DPR, di depan DPR or something. This is the kind of work that AI journalism can replicate, because you can just get the statement from the DPR, from the official, the DPR member, and that gets spread out word for word through the internet. Investigative journalism is so much harder to do, and it requires individuals. But where is investigative journalism in Indonesia? I've mentioned Tempo. There is also, of course, Project Multatuli. Tirto has been trying to do infographic investigative journalism for some time, but even Tirto is, changing its business model now in recent times. Kumparan was trying to do more investigative style reporting, but it is not particularly financially successful. And these organizations have come from guys who created Detik, who are sort of saying, well, now I need to repay my sins, because what we've done for Indonesian journalism is to turn it much more into clickbait. So the success of investigative journalism and journalism as we know it relies on us to change the whole business model of how journalism works in Indonesia online. And that is not going to be easy. But maybe AI chatbots will be so bad and will be so boring and procedural that everybody will now move to investigative journalism like Tempo and Kumparan and Tirto and Project Multatuli. Maybe AI will be what we need to burn down the .com type media in order for us to realize what good investigative journalism is. Thank you for your wonderful question.
Okay, welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
Good answer and comprehensive. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the question from Pak Sandi. Is there anyone raise hand? I think Pak Ari Usman. Are you there? Iya, Pak Ari Usman ya. Pak Ari Usman? Pak Ari? Okay, no. Okay,
No door prize for Pak Ari. He's gone.
Okay. Oh no, Pak Dedi.
Oh,
Pak Dedi Suhe. Ya, silakan Pak Dedi.
Ya, terima kasih. Karena tadi banyak yang bertanya soal media, saya kebetulan dari manajemen komunikasi publik. Jadi ingin bertanyanya soal politik tadi, Bu. Mr. Ross tadi kan di slide-slide-nya ya banyak bicara soal TikTok sebagai medan perang gitu kan, medan perang pada pemilu. Tadi juga saya sempat baca bahwa Bongbong berhasil menulis ulang sejarah kelam bapaknya gitu ya. Nah, yang saya ingin bertanya tuh bagaimana, ini jujur ya, maksudnya secara jujur analisa dari Mr. Ross, bagaimana tentang keberhasilan Prabowo menutup kampanye negatif terhadap dia. Kan kita tahu bahwa selama ini yang namanya pelanggaran-pelanggaran HAM terus digaungkan gitu kan. Selama ini sampai pengajian Kamisan juga selalu didengung-dengungkan, tetapi di masyarakat itu tidak berpengaruh. Nah, saya tuh pingin dengar dari Mr. Ross bagaimana tanggapan atau analisis Mr. Ross tentang masalah ini gitu. Itu mungkin pertanyaan saya, karena kebetulan saya dari manajemen komunikasi politik. Hatur nuhun.
Okay.
Right. So just to confirm, you're asking that because you shifted from talking about TikTok in Marcos to the Kamisan issue with Prabowo. What is the connection between the two? Apa koneksi dalam Marcos TikTok?
Kamisan itu kan salah satu kampanye, dianggap salah satu kampanye negatif juga buat Prabowo, karena itu kan menggugat soal orang-orang yang hilang itu yang pada tahun 98.
Yep.
Itu kan terus-terusan digaungkan kan.
Yeah, so I think with both Marcos and Prabowo, the issues that you're talking about, for example, Marcos and corrupsi, or as they call in Philippines, plunder, that has been in media for quite a long time. Marcos has run as a senator. He's run as a vice presidential candidate previously, and his family has been part of politics and very well supported in the north of Philippines for many decades. Prabowo has also been in political life for a number of decades now. In fact, you could say that he's been running for president his whole life, which is what some people have joked with Prabowo, but it really has been his ambition for so long now. So for both these candidates, the criticisms of their past, Marcos and Prabowo, is now something that people have either come to understand or do not find as an issue. They say, yes, kita tahu, but nggak penting, ini zaman baru, like this is a different era, what they did in the past, nggak penting. Prabowo being the defense minister of the Jokowi government was very important because it showed throughout those 5 years that he could be a reliable minister who was supportive of government, and he now displays he's a safe pair of hands for many voters. They understand and they've seen Prabowo in power as defense minister. He did not try to, mount a coup with the defense, or he did not try to criticize Jokowi openly. So it's now to the point where people actually feel like these are a part of the furniture. So the most important thing for the victory of Marcos and for Prabowo is the support of the incumbent president, Jokowi and Duterte, respectively. And that negates anything that Kamisan or NGOs or academics might criticize them for their past, because they have the presidential support, and the president remains incredibly popular in Indonesia and, of course, previously in Philippines. So that has been the reason for their success.
Okay, thank you. I agree with you for this point. I mean, yeah, because the president now support the candidates, ya. Oke, Pak Dedi, cukup ya?
Cukup Bu. Berarti
it would have been very interesting.
Dukungan dari incumbent sangat-sangat besar gitu ya pengaruhnya.
Yeah, it would have been interesting, menarik sekali, if Jokowi had chosen Ganjar, for example. There is a political scientist might say, if Jokowi had chosen Ganjar, Ganjar would be president. If it was that important. And so if that was the case, you might have seen more of a debate, which is like sangat keras or maybe more policy issued. But Jokowi supporting Prabowo and Gibran meant that it was really the election was really always going to be won by Prabowo because of Jokowi's popularity.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, one last question, I think, because we will running out the time, from Giok, Mikom Unisba, from the chat box. I think, can you read the question?
Oh, me?
Yeah, but I will read this. Jika dibandingkan dengan negara lain, Indonesia sangat beruntung karena memiliki Dewan Pers yang menurut saya cukup berhasil dalam membentengi penyebaran disinformasi di media. Sayangnya, kewenangan Dewan Pers hanya terbatas pada media mainstream. Padahal disinformasi selama ini bertebarannya di media sosial. Sebagai pembanding, bagaimana Australia selama ini menerapkan regulasi untuk membendung disinformasi? Lembaga apa di Australia yang berwenang mengawasi dan memberikan sanksi jika ditemukan disinformasi di media mainstream dan media sosial? I think it's clear.
Yes, thank you. And another great point about Dewan Pers, to counter what I said of the importance of Dewan Pers. Maybe my next presentation, I will not be so confident in saying that Dewan Pers is a very success. I think you're right. Dewan Pers, of course, tried to have the verification tick a few years ago to say these organizations are legitimate media, and that also hasn't really worked. So there's many failures of Dewan Press, which I accept. Saying sekali, unfortunately, in Australia, the problem is there is no solution here as well. We have the equivalent of Dewan Press. We have a press council. We have ACMA, which is the Australian Communications and Media Authority. They are largely ineffective, and they haven't really been able to reduce disinformation in Australia. It is a growing problem, and the government is also scrambling to try to find a solution. And we had a recent election in Australia around the rights, the rights of Orang Asli Australia, where as citizens we had to vote whether Australians should have a voice to Parliament. It was called changing the constitution of Australia to give Orang Asli a specific chamber of Parliament, a specific role in Parliament. And Australians voted no, and disinformation was a strong reason for why it was no, because the idea was that Orang Asli would have a third chamber of Parliament. They would change the constitution. They would have more power than ordinary Australians. There was all of this disinformation, and Australians voted no, which is a really sad thing, because Orang Asli in Australia have really been affected by colonialism for many centuries, and it would have been great if they had a voice to Parliament. They didn't get it, and how do we try to look back on that campaign and say, how do we fix this? But it's a very big challenge here in Australia. We're currently going through a lot of disinformation about international students in Australia, where the government is actually promoting some of this disinformation, saying that international students are taking up houses, and that is the reason why Australians can't get a rental property, because we have too many international students. Bingung ya, tidak masuk akal. It doesn't make sense. But that is driving a lot of the discourse at the moment. So I'm afraid there is no solution in Australia either. It's something we need to keep working on, and perhaps young people like you can come up with solutions.
But Ross, what about, I mean, I was in Australia in 2009 until 2010 when I did my master. Comparing Indonesia and Australia is quite different. I think media in Australia is more conventional compared to Indonesian media. It's quite shocking for me, because it's usually a lot of information and all people can say anything in Indonesian media, but not in Australia. But it was in 2010. I think it's quite different with now. Back then we don't really familiar with social media like now. But is there any big changes?
I think one thing that Australia is very lucky to have, which we adopted really from the BBC in the UK, because of course Australia was a former British colony. So we adopted what is called the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, or ABC. And the ABC is funded by government, but it's independent from government, like the BBC or like NHK in Japan, to some extent. And so what that means is the journalists, who are very well paid, or reasonably well paid actually, compared to Indonesia, they're very well paid, the journalists, and they also very regularly criticize the government, and they criticize powerful people, and they can do that. Journalists in Australia can do that, including TV journalists. Indonesia, because of the legacy of TVRI or Antara, which has really been always part of the New Order propaganda machine, it's very hard for journalists for TVRI or Antara or RRI to be independent from and to criticize the government. And so what happens is nobody watches TVRI anymore. It's actually, I think the audience share is about 1.8%. In Australia, ABC is very much a trusted organization. And when there is a news, people can turn to ABC to get reliable information. But also they interview politicians and they criticize them publicly on television here. And that is a wonderful thing. It should not be taken for granted. Sometimes the government tries to reduce funding to the ABC.
Oh.
Sometimes they try and put the board members like who are politically aligned on the ABC. Sometimes they try to attack the journalists who criticize them. So it's not easy, but that is something that Australia has that I would love it if TVRI or Antara was able to, or RRI was able to be critical of government more. That would be, and more independent. That would be a terrific thing. But how do you convince a government that they should fund an organization which will criticize you? It's not easy to do.
Yeah, they have like long the culture since before, so it's quite difficult. Even though we know we have the legislation, undang-undang, yeah, we have undang-undang TVRI, RRI, they should be independent, but just like no difference between now and 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Yeah, still a long way to be like ABC or BBC for TVRI, RRI, and also Antara, I think.
If you are interested, one thing that I would recommend is to watch the interview of Ferdinand Marcos, which I'll put in the chat group, from the ABC interviewer in Australia, because this made huge headlines in Philippines, because for the first time, Marcos was asked questions in ways that Filipino journalists have been wanting to ask, but they couldn't really ask. So, oh, I'm not sure that was the right link. I might have sent you some ad. I apologize if that's the case, but it's a great idea of watching how a Southeast Asian leader is questioned, which I'd like to see more of.
Okay.
It looks like I'm sponsoring a toothbrush campaign there. I think. Apologies if there's some ad that comes up with that.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, I think the time for discussion has expired. Yeah, the question and session had to end. Thank you for the questions. A lot of questions and very fruitful discussion here, I think. Thank you also, Dr. Tapsell, for your answers and response. We have entered the final part of the seminar. To all participants, please make sure that you fill out the form from chat box to get the electronic certificate. And also for Dr. Tapsell, as a token of gratitude, we will present a symbolic certificate for your willingness to be a speaker at this seminar. Wait. Here where is the certificate? Wait a moment. Here is the certificate. Yeah, I will send you by email the certificate. Okay. Before the event is closed, we will have another group photo session. Udah tadi? Okay. Now we will have a group photo session. Please open your camera and smile, all the participants. Mr. Febri will take the pictures of us. How many slides? 4. Okay. Keep smiling. It's finished. Okay, thank you. Now I would like to inform you the winner of the door prize. Yeah, They are Bapak Franz, Ibu Atie Suprihatin, Bapak Fauzi, and Bapak Adam. Yeah, the organizer will contact you directly for the door prize. Now, I would like to inform you. Oh no, thank you for the speaker, Dr. Tapsell, for his expertise and knowledge with us. All participants, an electronic certificate will be sent to your email in a week, I think, inshallah. Yeah. Let us pass on the knowledge and inspiration gained from our discussion today. May you all continue learn and grow. I'm Arba'ivah Satriani. Thank you and have a great weekend. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Ros.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih banyak.
Okay.
Wan, bisa masalah materinya bagaimana?
Materinya nggak
bisa nggak di-share ya?
Tapi tidak mimpi-mimpiku. Kau bisa lumpuhkan tanganku, tapi tidak mimpi-mimpiku. Kau bisa merebut senyumku, tapi sungguh tak akan lama. Kau bisa merobek hatiku, tapi aku tahu obatnya. Manusia-manusia kuat, itu kita. Jiwa-jiwa yang kuat, itu kita. Manusia-manusia kuat, itu kita. Jiwa-jiwa yang kuat, itu kita. Kau bisa hitamkan putihku, kau takkan gelapkan apapun. Kau bisa runtuhkan jalanku, kan ku temukan jalan yang lain. Manusia-manusia kuat, itu kita. Jiwa-jiwa yang kuat, itu kita. Manusia-manusia kuat, itu kita. Jiwa-jiwa yang kuat, itu kita. Bila bukan kehendaknya, tidak satu pun jelasmu akan bawa bahaya. Manusia-manusia kuat, itu kita. Jiwa-jiwa yang kuat, itu kita. Manusia-manusia kuat, itu kita. Jiwa-jiwa yang kuat, itu kita. Manusia-manusia kuat, itu kita. Jiwa-jiwa yang kuat, itu kita. Manusia-manusia kuat, itu kita. Jiwa-jiwa yang kuat, itu kita. Kau bisa patahkan kakiku, patah tanganku, rebut senyumku. Hitamkan putihnya hatiku, tapi tidak mimpi-mimpiku.